Carl Jung uncovered a disturbing reality about narcissists that most people miss until it's far too late. Most of us assume that when a relationship ends or when we finally stand up for ourselves, the other person will eventually accept the reality and move on. But with a narcissist, the rules of human engagement are completely inverted. When they realize they can no longer pull your strings or dictate your emotions, they don't just walk away quietly into the night. Instead, they launch a final, ruthless tactic designed to dismantle years of your personal healing and hard-earned progress in mere weeks. This isn't just a disagreement, it is a calculated strike against your identity. If you aren't prepared for this specific maneuver, you will find yourself falling straight back into a trap you thought you had escaped. To survive this, you have to understand the high-stakes psychological game they are playing behind the scenes. Jung argued that a narcissist's greatest fear isn't actually being ignored or even being left alone. It is the terrifying moment they realize you have surpassed them in psychological strength. This realization is a direct hit to their fragile core because it proves they no longer own your narrative. As long as you remain wounded, confused, or seeking their approval, they feel safe and superior. But the second you stop reacting to their bait and start acting from a place of self-worth, the power dynamic shifts irrevocably. This is why the ending of a relationship with a narcissist is often more dangerous than the relationship itself. They view your independence as a personal insult, an act of defiance that must be punished. They aren't just trying to get you back. They are trying to break the version of you that dared to grow. If you don't recognize this as a desperate attempt to regain dominance, you might mistake their intensity for passion or regret. In reality, it is a scorched earth policy intended to leave you so emotionally depleted that you have no choice but to return to their control. For the narcissist, life is never about connection, intimacy, or mutual respect. It is strictly about dominance and the preservation of an image. Jung's deep research into the shadow self reveals that these individuals are experts at projecting their own deep-seated flaws, insecurities, and hidden shames onto you. By making you feel small, incompetent, or crazy, they can maintain a false illusion of their own superiority. They feed on your emotional energy like a drug, requiring a constant stream of validation to keep their inner void from swallowing them whole. As long as you are doubting your own reality or looking to them for permission to exist, you are fulfilling their primary need. You are the mirror that reflects back only the greatness they want to see, while absorbing all the toxicity they refuse to own. However, the moment you begin to set firm boundaries and start trusting your own internal voice over their external criticism, you trigger what Jung called a crisis of power reversal. This is a psychological emergency for the narcissist. When you stop being a source of fuel and start becoming an independent individual, you become a direct threat to the very core of their ego. You have essentially stopped playing the role they assigned to you, and without that role, their entire sense of self begins to crumble. This is when the mask slips entirely. When they can no longer charm you or guilt you into submission, they reach for their most dangerous and sophisticated weapon, psychological projection warfare. They will take every one of their own predatory traits and accuse you of possessing them, attempting to gaslight you one last time into believing that your growth is actually a downfall. They don't just want to win the argument, they want to win back the power to define who you are. What makes this final stage so confusing is the sheer speed and intensity of their shift. One day they may be cold and distant, and the next they are launching a full-scale assault on your character or your sanity. This is because they are fighting for their psychological survival. In their mind, if you are strong, they are weak. If you are right, they are wrong. They cannot coexist with an empowered version of you, because your light shines directly onto the shadow they've spent their whole lives trying to hide. This power reversal isn't just a change in the relationship, it's the total collapse of the narcissist's worldview. Understanding this allows you to see their lashing out for what it truly is, not a sign of their power, but a frantic admission that they have already lost it. Once a narcissist feels their grip on your life beginning to weaken, they undergo a radical and dangerous shift in strategy. They realize that the old methods of gaslighting and simple lying aren't working anymore because you've started to wake up. At this stage, they stop focusing on your past mistakes and start attacking your individuation, which is Carl Jung's term for your journey toward becoming your true, authentic self. Jung observed that a narcissist doesn't see your healing as a positive thing. They see your newfound strength as a massive obstacle that must be destroyed. To them, your growth isn't a victory, it's a personal betrayal. This leads to a toxic phenomenon called strength shaming, where they strategically attempt to make you feel guilty for the very qualities that finally set you free. They want you to believe that your progress has actually made you a worse person, hoping the weight of that guilt will crush your resolve. The language of strength shaming is subtle but incredibly sharp. You'll begin to hear targeted phrases like, "You've changed and not for the better," or "You used to be so sweet, now you're just selfish." These aren't just passing comments. They are precision-guided strikes meant to make you second-guess your transformation. The narcissist is essentially trying to rewrite the narrative of your recovery. They want to frame your healthy boundaries as walls and your self-respect as ego. By labeling your independence as a character flaw, they attempt to create a psychological conflict within you. They want you to think that in order to be a good person again, you have to abandon your strength and return to the weakened, compliant version of yourself that was so much easier for them to handle. What makes this tactic truly chilling is how the narcissist targets the specific areas where you have worked the hardest to heal. They possess a predatory instinct for finding your most hard-won victories and twisting them into weapons. If you have spent months or years in therapy learning how to finally say no, they will call you heartless, cold, or unsupportive. If you have finally rebuilt your shattered confidence and started to carry yourself with pride, they will immediately label it as arrogance or claim that success has gone to your head. If you found your voice and started speaking up for yourself, they will accuse you of being confrontational or difficult to work with. They are trying to turn your greatest assets into your biggest embarrassments. This is a highly calculated effort to force a psychological shrinkage. The narcissist knows that if they can make you feel enough shame about your growth, you will eventually self-sabotage. They want you to feel so uncomfortable in your new empowered skin that you voluntarily crawl back into the small, quiet, and broken box they designed for you. They are effectively mourning the loss of the version of you that they could manipulate with a single look or a sharp word. By shaming your strength, they are trying to convince you that your liberation has come at too high a cost, the cost of your kindness or your connection to them. You must realize that when they say, "I miss the old you," what they actually mean is, "I miss the version of you that didn't have the strength to stand up to me." Ultimately, strength shaming is the final evidence that you are winning. It is a sign that your boundaries are working and that you are no longer a viable source of supply for them. Jung's insights remind us that the narcissist is terrified of a person who is truly individualized, because such a person cannot be owned. Their insults are actually backhanded compliments. They are pointing directly to the parts of you that are now untouchable. When they call you selfish for choosing yourself, they are confirming that you are no longer choosing them at your own expense. Understanding this shift is vital because it allows you to hear their criticisms not as truth, but as the desperate sounds of a captor watching their prisoner walk out of the cell. You aren't becoming a worse person, you are becoming a person they can no longer control. And to a narcissist, that is the ultimate sin. When the narcissist realizes that shaming your strength isn't working, they will pivot to a much more seductive and dangerous strategy: nostalgic manipulation. This is a subtle form of psychological time travel, where they attempt to bypass your current boundaries by dragging your mind back to the past. They will suddenly start reminiscing about the early days of your relationship, the honeymoon phase, when things felt easy, light, and full of potential. They'll bring up old inside jokes, shared memories, or specific moments when you were particularly vulnerable and dependent on them. They say things like, "Remember how much we used to laugh?" Or, "I just miss the way things used to be before everything got so complicated." On the surface, this feels like a peace offering or a sign that they truly care. But in reality, it is a calculated attempt to make you feel homesick for a version of yourself that no longer exists. This tactic is designed to trigger a specific type of grief within you. By constantly highlighting the old you, the narcissist is trying to make you feel that your growth has robbed you of your happiness. They want you to believe that the price of your strength is the loss of joy and connection. When they tell you, "I miss the old you," they are not expressing love for your personality. They are expressing a deep, selfish longing for the version of you that was more compliant, more eager to please, and much easier to influence. They aren't mourning the loss of a partner. They are mourning the loss of a perfect source who didn't yet have the tools to see through their games. It is a trap meant to lure you back into outdated, submissive behaviors by making your current progress feel lonely and burdensome. The danger of this time travel trap is that it plays on your natural human desire for harmony and the hope that things can go back to normal. The narcissist knows that healing is hard work and that there are days when you feel exhausted by the constant need to maintain your boundaries. They wait for those moments of fatigue to strike with nostalgia, offering you a return to the good old days as a way to escape the tension of the present. They want you to start questioning whether your transformation was actually worth it. They might even try to convince you that you were happier when you were less aware, suggesting that your self-help journey or your therapy has only made you bitter or cold. If you aren't vigilant, you might actually start to miss that older version of yourself too, forgetting that the simplicity of that time was actually built on your silence and your self-sacrifice. You must remember that for a narcissist, the past is a weapon used to sabotage your future. When they reach back into history, they are looking for the version of you that they could still control. They want to reset the clock to a time before you knew their patterns, before you understood their tactics, and before you learned how to value yourself. Jung's insights into this psychological maneuver show us that they are trying to halt your evolution by making you feel like your true self is actually the person you used to be. But that person was a victim, and the person they are talking to now is a survivor. They are craving the victim because a survivor is someone they can no longer dominate. To beat this trap, you have to realize that the good times they are describing were often the periods when you were the most diminished. They are selective historians. They remember the laughter, but they conveniently forget the walking on eggshells, the silent treatment, and the manipulation that accompanied it. When they try to pull you into the time travel trap, stay firmly rooted in the present. Understand that the version of you they miss is simply the version of you that didn't have the power to say no. They aren't looking for a partner to share a future with. They are looking for a ghost from the past that they can possess once again. Don't let their nostalgia trick you into surrendering the freedom you fought so hard to achieve. Your growth isn't a mistake, and the old you isn't a destination. It's a place you've already outgrown for a reason. The absolute darkest move in the narcissist's entire playbook is something Carl Jung identified as manufactured vulnerability. This is a level of manipulation that feels incredibly personal because it doesn't attack your weaknesses, it attacks your greatest strengths, your kindness, your empathy, and your heart. Jung noticed that narcissists are world-class experts at weaponizing the very empathy that makes you human. Just as you are reaching your peak strength, the moment you feel most confident, clear-headed, and ready to move on for good, the narcissist will suddenly appear completely overwhelmed, desperately ill, or in the middle of a massive, self-created crisis. They have spent years tracking your emotional triggers, and they know exactly which emergency will force you to drop your defenses. It is a strategic strike designed to catch you at the height of your recovery and pull you right back into the mud. This isn't just bad luck, it is a staged performance. They will engineer financial disasters, sudden health scares, or intense emotional collapses that are specifically timed to coincide with your moments of clarity. For example, the day you finally decide to go no contact, or the week you land a major promotion, might be the exact moment they call you crying about a mysterious medical issue or an urgent family conflict. According to Jung, this is a calculated attempt to use your compassion as a leash. They know that you are a healer or a helper by nature, and they use that noble quality against you. They want to force you back into the caregiver role, where you are so busy fixing their life that you completely stop building your own. It is a brilliant, albeit evil way, to make you feel morally obligated to abandon your boundaries. The most disturbing part of this tactic is that the narcissist will often create the very problems they want you to solve. They might sabotage their own jobs, blow through their savings, or pick fights with others just to engineer a crisis that makes them look like the victim. They aren't looking for a solution, they are looking for your attention. Jung's research suggests that by appearing broken, the narcissist successfully shifts the spotlight off their past abusive behavior and onto their current suffering. If you try to bring up how they've hurt you, they will accuse you of being heartless for kicking them while they're down. This effectively silences your voice and makes you feel like the villain for even having boundaries. They are essentially asking you to trade your hard-won psychological strength for their temporary, faked comfort. You have to realize that this manufactured vulnerability is the ultimate test of your transformation. The narcissist is betting that your guilt is stronger than your self-respect. They are banking on the hope that you will see their quote-unquote pain and forget your own. But as Jung warned, if you step back into that caregiver role, you aren't actually helping them, you are just validating their manipulation. They don't want to get better, they want to get you back under their thumb. Every time you, quote, rescue them from a crisis they created, you are teaching them that their vulnerability is a master key that can unlock your life whenever they choose. To survive this final trap, you must understand that their crisis is not your responsibility. You can be a compassionate person without being a sacrificial lamb. Recognizing that their quote-unquote helplessness is actually a high-level control tactic is the only way to stay free and keep your own strength intact. To escape the gravity of this final trap, you must master the art of what Carl Jung called differentiated compassion. This is the psychological breakthrough where you finally learn how to acknowledge someone's pain without feeling a moral obligation to fix it. For most empathetic people, seeing someone suffer feels like a call to action. But with a narcissist, that impulse is exactly what keeps you enslaved. Differentiated compassion allows you to look at their crisis and say, I see that you are hurting, but I am not the solution to your problem. It is the realization that their chaos is a result of their choices, not a deficit in your kindness. By stepping back, you aren't being cruel. You are finally respecting the reality of the situation. You are choosing to be authentic to your own needs, rather than performing a role to gain the approval of someone who will never truly give it. This shift is tested every single time they ask you to break a boundary, just this once. You must recognize that just this once is never just once. It is a diagnostic test. The narcissist is checking the structural integrity of your new life to see if there's still a way back in. They use high-pressure situations to see if they still hold sway over your emotions. If you bend your rules because of their crisis, you are sending a signal that your boundaries are negotiable and that their needs are still more important than your peace. Jung's ultimate revelation in this area is profound. Narcissists don't just dislike your strength, they are absolutely terrified of it. Your growth acts as a mirror that reflects the maturity and emotional depth they were too weak to achieve. When you stand firm, you aren't just protecting yourself. You are exposing the fact that their power was always dependent on your cooperation. True power, as Jung described it, isn't about becoming a cold person or becoming immune to manipulation. You are human, and you will always feel the pull of empathy. Instead, true power is the ability to see the trap in real time, call it by its name, and choose yourself anyway. It is the moment you stop asking, "How can I help them?" and start asking, "Is helping them going to cost me my soul?" When you choose authenticity, you stop being a character in their script and start being the author of your own. You realize that your life is not a resource for them to mine whenever they feel empty. This is the hardest part of the journey because it requires you to be okay with them thinking you are the bad guy. But once you accept that their approval was a cage, you find that their disapproval is actually a form of freedom. Your liberation begins the second you become impossible to control. When the narcissist realizes that neither shaming, nor nostalgia, nor manufactured crises can move you, they lose their grip entirely. You become a dead frequency to them, someone they can no longer broadcast their toxicity to. This is the moment you win, not by defeating them in an argument, but by becoming so rooted in your own truth that their games no longer make sense to you. Jung believed that the greatest task of a human life is to become who you truly are, and by choosing your own authenticity over their manipulation, you are fulfilling that destiny. You are proving that your worth is not tied to how much you can endure, but to how much you are willing to protect. In the end, their final trick only works if you forget your value. Once you remember it, the game is over. Ultimately, the greatest revelation Carl Jung left us with is that the narcissist's obsession with controlling you is actually the highest compliment to your power. They don't fight this hard to keep someone who is weak. They fight this hard because they know that once you are fully conscious of your worth, their influence vanishes forever. Every time you resist the pull of their manufactured crises or their nostalgic traps, you are doing more than just protecting your energy. You are reclaiming your soul. True strength isn't about never feeling the sting of their manipulation. It's about recognizing the game for exactly what it is, calling it out by name, and choosing your own peace anyway. You were never meant to be a supporting character in someone else's toxic drama. The moment you decide that your authenticity is more important than their approval is the moment you finally walk free. If this breakdown of Jung's insights helped you see the patterns in your own life more clearly, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our upcoming deep dives into psychological resilience. We are building a community dedicated to truth and healing, and your journey is a vital part of that. If you know someone who is currently struggling with a difficult person or feeling guilty for setting their boundaries, share this video with them. It might be the exact wake-up call they need to stop shrinking and start rising. Thank you for watching. Stay rooted in your truth, and I'll see you in the next one.